Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette back in, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Micheletti, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod. I'm Brandon Mileski from The Fan. Pat Micheletti, former Golden Gopher great, joins me as always. Beyond the Pod brought to you by SodaStick.com. Hi, Pat.
Hello, Brandon. How are you?
Good. We've done an entire off-season of podcasts. All
Unbelievable.
Minnesota Wild finally getting underway. This obviously being taped on a Thursday. They begin tomorrow night in Anaheim. And I figured let's do a little season preview show. I know you could mostly break it down. You don't need any help. But I figured we'd try to get some additional help. And we have two guests today. Our first one would be Jessi Pierce, who covers the Wild for NHL.com and is a part of the Bar Down podcast. Hi, Jessi.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good. And we're also joined by, from the Minnesota Wild Radio Network, Falness. Hi,
First
Kevin.
of all, terrible impersonation. Second of all, if we go alphabetically, wouldn't I be first? Why does she get top billing?
Ladies
because
first.
It's me, and then it's you. So that it makes sense.
I get it.
The controversy begins already.
I'm a ladies first kind of guy, and two, more people like her.
Yeah, well, you know, truth on both parts. You're such a knight in shining armor, aren't you?
All right, well, this is an entire Minnesota Wild season preview show. So we'll begin with you, Pat. Let's just give you a very broad, generic question. After last season's, I think impressive season. I think maybe overachieved a little bit. How do you view this team going into this year?
Well, let's go back to last year. I think they created something that the organization has lacked in quite some time, and that was a new culture, a new belief. Players having each other's backs, all of those little intangibles that you need to be successful. Obviously we were a little shocked by what happened last summer with especially Ryan Suter. But listen, just knowing their thought process, they have a plan in place, and I think they're going to have a really, really good year. I thought initially that the Suter, losing him might have an effect, might bring them down a little bit. But, just after watching preseason and seeing what they have, I think they're going to be just fine.
Jessi?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think last year there was definitely a changing of tides, if you will. The locker room culture just seemed stronger. It seemed to get together. There was finally some offense for the Minnesota Wild, courtesy of Mr. Kirill Kaprizov, who eventually did get his signing here for 5 years, which is very exciting for the entire organization. I still have some questions around the blue line. I think losing Ryan Suter is going to hurt the team in the long run. I mean, Alex Goligoski is filling that top pair just fine. But John Merrill, Jordy Ben, I'm not as convinced on. I like Kulikov. I think he's really fit in very, very nicely. But those two I still kind of am questioning. And does that mean Callan Addison might get a call up sooner rather than later? But, the defense, I'm still trying to feel out. I know, Falness, you probably are as well, eh?
I think for the defense, yeah. I mean, there's some question there on that third pair, but I don't think Goligoski's going to have any problem stepping into that top pair with Jared Spurgeon. I think they're going to be magnificent. And then what you have in Brodin and Dumba. So I don't know that the third pair is as much of a factor, but at the same time, I'll tell you what I took out of preseason. It's that the future is going to be phenomenal for this team. The young talent that's coming up. Everyone was talking about Boldy and Rossi, and then you got this Beckman kid that comes out of nowhere and lights up the stage on the highest level possible. And then Duhaime is the guy that comes out of the weeds and jumps into this lineup, and I think is going to have a significant impact. I think he's more than just a fourth-line role player. I think he's going to have a significant impact on this year. So that's what I took out of preseason. I'm really excited to drop the puck on this thing.
Brandon, I want to talk to you about the D a second. And we all were enamored with Susie Cole. Oh man, now they have 6D. However, those guys were not playing 12 to 18 minutes a night, right? And so in reality, you're looking at about 8 to 10 minutes out of that bottom six. Am I correct?
Well, no, I think Susie and Cole were playing more than that last year, but
Were they?
Susie was a healthy scratch for Seattle in their first game, in case you guys missed that.
Yeah, which is unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Well, they got a bunch of defensemen in the expansion draft, but
Right.
I think the third line was contributing more last year. You know, Suter's minutes were starting to go down the last couple of years, and I think a lot of it is obviously you've got, you know, Brodeen's minutes are able to go up and Dumba's are able to go up, but I think the third pairing being able to produce more than just, you know, killing the occasional penalty. That is kind of a concern for me. I don't have any concerns about Goligoski. I'm with Kevin, where I think he's not the exact same type of player Suter is, but I think he's going to be able to give you a first line role where you can put him up against opponents' best lines and not be worried. And I think he might be able to actually add a little bit more offensively than Suter did.
Yeah, he loves jumping in the play, right? I think that's fantastic.
You know, I'm with you, Jessi, where now this is always so hard because you just watch training camp and you watch preseason, and let's face it, there's a big difference between preseason play and regular season play. Kulikov, from the little I've seen, I liked him. I thought he's mobile. I think he's going to be a little bit more offensive than your typical third pairing defenseman. The one guy I thought looked like a disaster was Jordy Ben. I watched him in preseason games and thought this guy's going to get cut and they're going to go get another defenseman on the waiver wire. So we've obviously seen him in the past with Dallas and he's looked okay at times there, but he's the guy I'm concerned about the most. John Merrill. I didn't get to see him enough, really. You know, I think he's one of those defensemen where he's like an offensive lineman where if you don't see him on the score, you know, if you just don't hear about him, he's doing fine. He's not going to do anything that's going to wow you, but as long as he's not making mistakes, and he's kind of going to play like a Nate Prosser role for you. But I don't think our third pairing is going to get the amount of minutes we have in the past, and to me, that is a concern, especially if you get any injuries in your top four. Now you got an Addison down in Iowa that you'd like to be able to think would jump back up, but out of any, you know, it's weird going into a season not talking about the center position. And here we are, we're talking about the third pairing defenseman.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. What I like about that third pair defense is the fact that they've added some bulk back there. Not that Susie didn't have that, not that Cole didn't have that, but I think any of the three of those guys, Kulikov in particular, I think he's going to be the guy that's going to be the rock on that third pair, and he's got a little bit of grit to him, and so does Ben, so does Merrill. And if you need guys to go up there and stir the pot, I think those three can fill that role.
Yeah, and you need that. I mean, what did this team lack? I mean, we all saw the playoffs a year ago, and every time you touch the puck, you get hit. And you know, they in Minnesota, if you're looking at what could they improve on, they needed more size on the back end. You know, and it's tough to find a guy 6'3", 6'4", mobile, puck moving, blah 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 blah. You know, there's just not a lot of them out there. So I think they filled the need. I think maybe that we get a little bit overly concerned about, geez, that doesn't look very good. But we're just gonna. I think. I just think that it made them fill the need that they needed to do.
Yeah, I would say my favorite part of the defense, though, too, is they've upped the pace a little bit. I think Ryan Suter tended to kind of pull back a little and not necessarily, slow it down for lack of better term. I think Goligoski very smoothly loves to transition and get it in play and move quickly, which I think is my one shining light on that. Right?
I think that's a great point, Jessi. I think their plan the last couple of years has been to get more team speed, and I think that's why a guy like Duhaime is going to be on the roster right away because that guy can fly. He can skate. Let's talk about the center position. We'll begin with you, Kevin. Where are we at in the center position? I think long-term, when you look at Rossi and even Kuznetsov, who's playing in Russia right now, who seems to be playing well, I think we have a little bit more optimism long-term, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road. But for this specific season, with Eriksson Ek moving up to the top line, Ryan Hartman, who played center at the end of the year, he'll play on that line with Foligno and Greenway. Still kind of some uncertainty. Obviously, Frederick Gaudreau, who we haven't seen a lot of. Victor Rask can always be thrown in that mix. Nico Sturm. Where are we at with the center position just for this season? How are you feeling about the position?
Well, I think the most important one is going to be Joel Eriksson Ek and how he complements that top trio, right? I mean, we know what that two-headed monster can do with Zuccarello and Kaprizov. But how does Jules Eriksson fit into that mix? He gets the promotion playing with Foligno and Greenway last year and blew up. I predicted on the Bar Down Beauties podcast that he'd score 40 goals. I said that completely tongue in cheek, but I wasn't that far off, as a matter of fact.
No.
He blew up last year. He got a pay grade upgrade. He got a promotion in the lineup. And I don't know. I mean, he's looked really good in the preseason and in practice for whatever that's worth. Now I want to see it count when it matters. So that's the interesting one. I think Nico Sturm fills that role perfectly on the fourth line. Ryan Hartman isn't going to miss a beat. He's going to play that exact same role that Jules Eriksson, at least to some degree, on playing with for now Foligno and Greenway. I guess the question is, like you said, Goudreau and is it Goudreau? Is it Rask? Is it Pitlick? Is it Rask? Who's going on the other side? But I think for 3 out of 4 of those spots, I think you're in a pretty good spot.
I'm glad you remembered that, because I think we all thought you were a little insane when you made that prediction, Kevin, as most people do when you.
I think you all called me mental, and turns out I'm an evil genius.
Yes, exactly. But I love the way that he's fitting in with Kaprizov and Zuccarello. I mean, he's got that size. He gets down low. I mean, it just seems like the perfect complement to the way that Kirill and Mats play, right? I mean, it's just been really fun to watch that top line, and he absolutely deserves it. He deserved that promotion, although I do love that Foligno jokingly said, hey, he was with Playmakers last year too with me and Greenway, so you got to love that. I'm interested to see, like you had mentioned, Kevin, how Goudreau does play out. I know he had specifically requested to play with Rem Pitlick, as they have had a little bit of chemistry back in their Nashville days, so I know that's a pairing that Dean really wants to get together there, so that could be a really good thing, but I know they want to give Rem Pitlick a little bit more time. I actually haven't seen as much of Rem Pitlick. Have any of you guys know a little bit more? I've heard really great things when he was with the Gophers, but I don't know much about him other than that.
I'm going out on a limb here. I think we'll see game 1, game 2, game 3, Ek probably in the middle between those two. I think we're going to see a different centerman between Kaprizov and Zuccarello. I do strongly believe that they will at some point reunite Ek, Greenway, and Foligno. I think that is a kind of the what word am I looking for? Just the rock of their team. We saw last year that they, I think I deemed them the momentum changing line, and the team needed something, they got it, when they were down, they got everyone back on the right track. I think, we're going to see a lot of experimenting early, I believe. And, but it's a long season, but eventually I think you're going to see Ek back between them. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, Pat, you're bringing up the point I was going to bring up, that it looks great to put Eriksson Ek up at the top line, and I think Eriksson Ek will do just fine there, and the line will probably take a step up. My fear is, and I'm sure the coach's fear is well, what made this team great last year is you had a Kaprizov line that could score just based off of Kaprizov, and Fiala's line could score based off of Fiala, and then you had a third complementary line that at times was your best line many times throughout the season. Those three they were just perfect together. They had great chemistry. They played the same way. And my fear is well, yeah, you might upgrade that top line a little bit, but then if you have a downgrade on that second or third line, whatever you want to call it, and not that Ryan Hartman can't play. I think Ryan Hartman's a good player and played well in the center position at the end of last year, but it's just different, right? It's just a different chemistry. Even if he's playing well, it's not the same feel as it was before. How much that coaching staff loved that line together last year. And I think it's going to be hard for the coaches at some point to not go, I'd like to put those three back together. My guess is maybe once we get to January, February, maybe Marco Rossi has played so well down in Iowa that you slide him in, because the problem is if you move Eriksson Ek back to Foligno and Greenway, I still don't know if there's a great option on this roster to play with Kaprizov and Fiala.
Well, let's talk about the
Kaprizov and Zuccarello. I'm sorry.
That every fan
dreaming about Kaprizov and Fiala, Brandon.
Every fan in the state of Minnesota does not like, and that's Victor Rask. Okay, there's not a fan that likes him.
I don't know about that, but
Alexis does. If you my Bar Down Beauties co-host. But.
Well, okay,
you like him, Pat.
Well, it's not that I like him. It's that
I think he's okay.
Is that I understand him. He filled a role that Dean Evison wanted to have filled. And I think he knows his role when he plays with Kaprizov and Zuccarello. You know, be good defensively. He wasn't horrible. And contribute, right? He's not going to be that big point producing guy in the middle, but he worked with them, right? When you have a guy that gets 29 goals and whatever Zuccarello had points wise, it worked. It's not ideal. It's not Connor McDavid. It's not Nathan McKinnon, but it worked for that line. So I think when you look at this team, you don't say, oh, best player, put them on the same line. It's what's going to fit and what's going to work from a team perspective. And that's why, we get too harsh when saying, oh, man, Kaprizov could have had 50 last year if he would have had a better center. And, it's awfully tough to score in the NHL, as we all know. But, so I don't know if he would be the answer. I like Rossi eventually getting there, and maybe he will. But so I just think there's going to be a lot of tinkering early.
I don't think there's any question that would be an upgrade eventually. If you're talking October, November, December, then you got to deal with the reality of the guys that are on your roster. And I don't have a problem with Jules Eriksson in that role. I think
no one has a problem with it. Yeah.
I don't think that I think if anything, that's going to be an upgrade from Rask there, and that's nothing against Victor Rask. And I don't have a problem with Ryan Hartman in that role with Foligno and Greenway. I think it's more of a question, does Greenway stay on that line? Because Brandon Duhaime's knocking on his door. And I think that's a kid that would fit directly on that line. If Greenway takes a step back, Duhaime can fill that role in a huge way.
2 points on each of that. I think, Pat, you brought up a good point as far as that centering that line with Zuccarello and Kaprizov. You do need a guy that knows the role there and isn't going to be intimidated by playing with the two best players on the squad, right? And I know Jules Eriksson has taken on that too. So, I mean, he's really – I think that's why he's slotted in. He's not intimidated or all of a sudden going out and trying to change his game. He's still the same player. And Victor Rask, again, went in and played his game. So it is a tough position to fill for that reason alone. And then to Kevin's point on Jordan Greenway, it seems like he's taken a step back. And I hate to say that because I was so excited for him last year. It seemed like the work ethic was there, everything. And this year, even just early on in preseason, I mean, we saw that first game and it was atrocious. Like he's gotten a little lazy again. So I'm super curious to see what happened or, how he continues to up his game a little bit, because I was so excited to see him take that step. And now it's like another step back and see.
Yeah. Here's the deal on Greenway. I think 1, 2, 3, and count me 4. We have higher expectations from him. Everybody has higher expectations from him because when you look at him, you see a guy who could dominate, right? And dominate every night. And our expectation is for him is to dominate every night, control the front of the net, knock guys off pucks, score a few more goals. I think maybe we have to temper our expectations of him and understand that we're going to get the good and we're going to get the not so good. And it's not going to be consistent. And so, that's kind
How do you have to temper expectations? He's a guy that's built to be a stud in this league. And maybe, why do I have to accept mediocrity?
Because I have a joy.
You know what?
Wild. No.
That's a great question, Kevin. But maybe he's not what we think he is. Right? He's got the body and all the tools and all that, but maybe he doesn't have the mentality to bring that every night, and which is unfortunate, but not every player has that, right? That drive, that will, that I'm gonna, I want to be, maybe he's just comfortable in who he is. And I, it's sad to see because man, oh man, can you imagine him being a dominant player every night? This team would be a lot better.
Well, I think we need to be a little bit patient. I think we're jumping the gun a little bit too early on Greenway. Like we haven't played a regular season game yet. I know the concern is his drive and his motivation, but we're playing preseason games. I don't know what you expect. You're not going to expect playoff type energy and intensity out of him in the first preseason game. And to my point earlier, his numbers might go down because he's not going to have Joel Eriksson-Ek on his line to start off. And as long as Eriksson-Ek's not on his line, like that line's just not going to be as good. Ryan Hartman's a fine player, don't get me wrong, and I think that line can contribute and they can shut down other teams' top lines. But to expect Foligno and Greenway to put up the same numbers they were putting up last year, I think is asking for a lot. I think those were two guys. I know Greenway didn't do it the entire season, but Foligno had a career year. Greenway halfway through the season had a career year. I think it might be just to expect that to duplicate without Eriksson-Ek on your line, I think is asking a lot.
You just made my point then about potentially that line being reunited, because if Foligno drops and Greenway drops, he led the team in assists. Well, then your team drops. And so, I think they're going to experiment and tweak, and we'll see where it takes us.
I have a question on the offense. Nick Bukestad, where do we think that he kind of fits in? Because I'm kind of curious to see if he is an odd man out at some point in time. He's always just kind of there, which isn't bad, right? But I'm interested to see what kind of transpires with him this season. I think that's a guy that I'm really keeping my eye on.
Well, what do you mean he's always just there? I mean, he's a fourth line guy that's got speed. I mean, he's got some potential there on that fourth line, and I think the way him and Sturm complement each other in particular, I was a fan of that, and I look forward to seeing those two work again together. I think Sturm's coming in with a ton of confidence into this.
I love Nico Sturm.
I think Bukestad feeds off of Sturm as much as vice versa. So
I don't know. I think
Duhaime on that line. I think that'd be a pretty good fourth line.
I would rather see a call up from down below. I'd like to see Matt Boldy uninjured, obviously, coming in. I think he would fight for that spot. I think you also look at Adam Beckman, as we discussed down there. I don't, and I love Nick Bukestad. I love our Minnesota guys, right? But I don't know. I'm not as
he's a bubble 12th, 13th forward at this stage of his career, and he's fine in that role. I don't mind him in that role. Before we move on to some very difficult questions for you guys, I want to bring up SodaStick.com. They sponsor Beyond the Pod. Go to SodaStick.com to get your original Minnesota sports inspired goods. If you haven't seen the stuff yet, you got to check it out. All of their apparel is screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You will love it. And we're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. Use the code KFAN for 15% off. That is SodaStick.com, SotaStick.com. Original Minnesota sports inspired goods. Use the code KFAN for 15% off your next order. All right, it's time for some difficult questions. We'll begin with you, Pat. Your biggest concern for the Minnesota Wild this season?
Oh boy, duplicating what they did a year ago. Meaning, you mentioned Foligno, you mentioned Greenway led the team in assists. You mentioned, Kaprizov in his second year. Sometimes we find that guys take a little step back. I don't see that in him by any stretch of the imagination, but so I think those would be the things that concern me a little bit.
All right, Jessi.
For the sake of difference, I would say goaltending. Not necessarily that I'm overly concerned, but I'm not as confident in the goaltending tandem this year. We saw the holes in rookie goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen, who is still a rookie this year as well. And can Cam Talbot keep up what he had done last year? I mean, I think that's the biggest question I have for the squad this year. I mean, is that a good tandem moving forward? You've got Wallstead in the back biting as well eventually in the future, but this year I'm curious to see how those guys perform.
That's where I was going to go with the goaltending as well, because of Kaapo Kähkönen. I have a ton of confidence in Cam Talbot. Kähkönen, I feel good about one day, and then he plays a couple of games, and I feel a little more concerned. And I don't think the preseason did anything to quiet those nerves. But if he can be a good backup to Cam Talbot, who will get, of course, the lion's share of the work, but over a course of an 82-game season, you're going to need Kaapo Kähkönen to perform. He's got to be able to perform when he's called upon, and he's got to get 20-some games. I got to have confidence in my backup goaltender. So I was going to say the exact same thing. Beyond that, I want to see that chemistry. Is it a concern? But I want to see the Sedin-like telepathy between Kaprizov and Zuccarello take another step forward. The kid scored 27 goals last year in a 50-game schedule. If he can do something, if he hits 30, I'm putting the over-under at the 35 at 35 goals, and I'm hoping I'm way under. I want to see more from Kirill Kaprizov.
Brandon.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, my biggest concern is basically what I just talked about, a couple minutes ago. That I'm concerned about guys. They had a lot of guys that had career years last year, and you never know what the schedule they had when you're playing Anaheim and San Jose and LA and Arizona 8 times. Like how much of that is legit and how much of that is fool's gold. So that would be my biggest concern going into this year. Kevin, we'll start with you on the next big question. Who will be the biggest surprise on this team?
I mean, is it a surprise because he already made the roster? That was probably the surprise for Brandon Duhaime, but I still think that there's going to be a lot more to hear about from this kid. That goal he scored, I think it was the 5th preseason game, was lights out, busting down the left side, impossible angle, shoves it under the crossbar. I think there's more to this kid than just 4th line minutes, and I think he's going to knock, if any of these guys above him take a step back, he's going to be able to fill a role real quick. So my biggest surprise is I think a bust-out season for Brandon Duhaime.
Jessi?
Nico Sturm. I told you I loved him. I think every year that we see him, he continues to take another step forward. I think he is going to also make a point to move up from that 4th line and maybe slot into the 3rd line at some point in time. I love everything that kid does. I absolutely think it's just tremendous. And again, he has the work ethic to go for it, and I'm excited to see what he can produce this season.
Pat?
Well, he's not on the team right now. He's in the American League, but I think Marco Rossi is going to I don't know if I want to call it a surprise more than a, just something that's going to give this team a good spark. I think they have a plan for him. I think they want to get him games. I think they know what he can do and how he can help them. And so I think they're just going to bide some time with him. But I think he could be a difference maker as the season rolls along.
Yeah, I think Beckman and Rossi at some point could definitely make huge impacts on this roster. I am with Jessi on this one as Nico Sturm. Pat, you and I have talked about him a lot last year about how he's kind of Joel Eriksson-Ek light, but in terms of he's got the work ethic like Jessi mentioned. The guy can skate. He can skate at NHL level. He can play the 200-foot game that you love, Pat. Like he's big, strong, physical. What I loved, I just read the story a couple days ago from Michael Russo where he did an entire thing on Nico Sturm, and I don't know how you could read that and not go like, man, I believe in Nico Sturm this year. Like, he talked with Bill Guerin of what he needed to work on. They made it clear, hey, you got to work on your hands, which he does. If he wants to elevate from 4th line to 3rd line and heck somehow get into the 2nd line at some point, that's an element of his game he needs to work on. But he scored at a decent rate given the amount of minutes he got last year. It's just obviously you're going up against 4th liners. The question is, can he go up against 2nd liners eventually? But he's a free agent after this year. There's clear motivation there that he wants to get paid and he wants to elevate himself in the lineup. And I just like that. Just reading the story, he wasn't satisfied with being a bottom 6 guy.
No.
And there are a lot of players I think are fine with that role and content in being that spot. But just reading what he was saying, like he wants to elevate, he wants to be a bigger part of that team, and that right there makes me think. And let's face it, Pat, there's openings there, right? I mean, Gaudreau is not cemented in next to Kevin Fiala,
right?
Ryan Hartman is not cemented in with Greenway and Foligno. Like there's room for him to move up in this lineup.
Well, yeah, they could certainly move him up. They could move Hartman to the wing, and that's the great thing about Hartman is that you can play him anywhere. You can play him on a 4th line, and he understands what it means to play on the 4th line, what your role is. You can move him up. He's shown he's got good hands. He can score, as we've seen, and so there's a lot of guys that you could move around in this lineup. And so, listen, Sturm is a guy that he understands the game, and he needs more seasoning. And once he gets that, even though he was up all year, he'll earn those minutes, and he could be a factor, no doubt about it.
All right, we'll begin with you on this one, Pat. I think this is the tough one. I think number 1 is easy and number 8 is easy. After that, 2 through 7, I don't know how you analyze. What is your prediction for how the Central Division is going to play out this year?
Colorado. Okay, Colorado. They're of course, what they have coming back, and Darcy Kemper is going to be the X factor. Can he handle the pressure in Colorado? It's not Arizona anymore. So that will be interesting. I think he will. He's a really good goaltender. I really love the St. Louis Blues. I think they're going to be an awfully tough out for a lot of teams. They have good goaltending. Their D is different than what it used to be. Lost Vince Dunn, obviously, and Pietrangelo and guys like that. But I think they're going to be good. I have Minnesota slotted third. And then, from the rest, it's going to be, I'm not sold on Dallas as a lot of people are. I don't, you got a loose cannon in Radulov. Is he going to be hurt? Is he going to be suspended? Is he going to, what's the deal with him, right? When he plays, he's great. Sagan is back and apparently healthy, but he's hurt an awful lot. Jamie Benn is getting up there in age a little bit. Those are the guys that they're relying on. Pavelski's another year older.
Hell of a blue line, though.
Right.
They do have a great blue line, but I'm not completely 100% sold on them.
I didn't catch who your second place team in the Central was. I heard Colorado. I heard Minnesota. Who's two?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Okay.
St. Louis. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Dallas is mine. Go for it.
It's no doubt Colorado's going to be your odds-on favorite to be the number one team. And watching them last night against the Blackhawks did nothing to dissuade
without
them.
Nathan McKinnon.
Nathan McKinnon. And I mean, they're loaded. Watching Cale Makar still play and then throw Byram in on that as well. I mean, that is a loaded team. And again, the X factor is Darcy Kemper, because we know what he was like here in Minnesota. Took a step up in Arizona with very little, not very much expectations there in the desert. He's got a ton of expectations now, trying to fill in for Philip Grubauer, who's off to Seattle. But that to me is the odds-on favorite to win the Central Division. Arizona is a terrible team; they'll finish last. Nashville is hot on their heels. I don't think they're going to be very good this year. But then the rest are just kind of a hodgepodge. And I think the Wild are right there in the mix of that. I think for sure they should be, on paper, a top 3 team in the Central Division to get that home ice advantage. But I still like the Winnipeg Jets. And I know Chicago's the darling, and what they've done to revamp their entire squad outside of Taves and Kane, throwing in those other bit players, including the Vezina Trophy winner in Marc-Andre Fleury. But I still pick it. My top 3 in the Central would be Colorado, Winnipeg, Minnesota.
Jessi?
Interesting. I got Colorado. Surprise, surprise. Dallas is my number 2 because if they're healthy, they're good. If they can figure out goaltending as well.
He laughed at you. He scoffed. Very, very unnice.
I know, Pat. No, I do. I think if they're healthy, why not? And I think because all those players are aging, they have that window, so they're going all in on it, right? I mean, I think Dallas is going to be a tough team. I agree. I think it's a hodgepodge in the middle for sure, like Kevin said, because really they're all kind of very similar. I do have Minnesota at 3, and then I do have Chicago at 4 because, again, similar. You've got Jonathan Taves back. Patrick Kane hasn't missed a beat. You got Marc-Andre Fleury, and then you've got these young guys who are
the Brincat. The Brincat is ridiculous.
So good.
30-some goals last year.
I know. So, I mean, I've got them rounded out at 4, but St. Louis, Winnipeg could slot in there. I agree with you, Kevin. I think Nashville's going to be kind of down and out again this season, despite my affinity for Mikhail Granlund, who I think I saw is wearing a letter now. Oh, roll the eyes, Kevin. Roll the eyes.
You saw that? Damn you, video.
Yeah, obviously I got Colorado on top. I'm with Jessi, not necessarily at Dallas at number 2, but I do think Dallas is going to have a bounce back here. They had a really weird start to the season last year with all the COVID issues, and they weren't playing any games, and it just seemed like the whole season was a mess from the get-go, and that blue line looks pretty good. And I'm with Kevin. I got Winnipeg number 2, even though they did not perform too well last night in Anaheim. And I'll take the Wild 3, Dallas 4, Chicago gets into the playoffs at 5 because there's going to be 5 teams coming out of the Central Division. Pat, your St. Louis Blues are on the outside looking in.
Ooh, and do you have Winnipeg making it or not?
Yeah, I got Winnipeg number 2 in the division.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yep. All right.
Interesting.
All right. Finally, Stanley Cup prediction. Kevin Falness, the floor is yours.
The Minnesota Wild for sure. In all honesty, it's hard to go against Tampa Bay considering the equity that they've built, and I hate picking the Colorado Avalanche. But if I'm going to go off the page and pick someone other than Tampa Bay, I got to pick the Avalanche. I mean, I just think top to bottom, they are that good. Again, the X factor is going to be Darcy Kemper and how he holds up under the pressure and the spotlight that's going to be there in the Mile High Mountains. But if I'm picking a Stanley Cup prediction, I got to take the Colorado Avalanche as much as I hate it.
Jessi?
New York Islanders. Pat already knows this.
They're not making the playoffs.
Yes,
they are not make. They will not make the playoffs.
Not only are they making the playoffs, they're winning the Stanley Cup.
They got a 45-year-old defenseman that's going to have to play.
I don't care. I love them. I want it for Anders Lee. I want it for Brock Nelson.
What the Minnesota flavor. Zach Parise.
Yeah.
Oh, they traded Micheletti. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they've got Bellows down waiting in the wing. No, I've been rooting for the Islanders the past couple of seasons because they're so close. Like, they're just there, and I love their coaching staff. I like everything about it. I would cheer for the Islanders win it. That's my pick. I'm keeping it. It's sticking. Pat, you'll be sorry you went against it.
Who do you have in the West? Did I miss it?
Colorado. I didn't say Colorado. They'd beat Colorado.
Okay. I think the East is loaded. I think the West is a lot closer. Hence, I will go the Florida Panthers.
Ooh.
Making it. And I'm sticking with it. I told Jess this a month ago. Yeah. I'm going with the St. Louis Blues to get back to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Pat.
Pat.
If I were you, I would go to Vegas right now and do a Florida Panthers versus St. Louis Blues matchup because you would get great odds on that.
Thank you. Maybe I will.
So go throw $100 down and you'll be like a millionaire if that happens.
Thank you. I might. Yeah. Who do you have, Brandon?
Pat, you know how on Beyond the Pond when you and I and Nate Miller used to be together and every year Nate Miller would pick the San Jose Sharks and every year he would fail?
Yeah.
That's basically become me with the Colorado Avalanche. Every year I pick the Avalanche to win the cup and they fail.
Good point.
Yep. I'm going to go with it again, and if it doesn't happen this year, I'll have to abandon my Colorado Avalanche prediction. But I think it's the Avalanche. I have no idea how to decipher what's going to go on in the Eastern Conference. I have doubted the New York Islanders every year. Like every year they get to the playoffs, and I pick whoever is going to go against them in their series. And the Islanders win because they're a well-coached team. Barry Trotz is maybe the best coach in hockey, and they find a way to play together. That being said, eventually Toronto has to do something in the playoffs, don't they? I mean, they're too talented.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Colorado over Toronto.
Oh, that's a good pick. That would be a great cup.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Jessi, Kevin, really appreciate your time today joining us, as always.
Hey, anytime.
The pleasure was yours.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Can't wait to see all of you in person.
Kevin, I can't wait to hear you tomorrow night on the Minnesota Wild Radio Network.
Joe O'Donnell, Tom Reed, puck drops at, I'm told, 9:05, something like that, but pregame at 8:45 on a station near you.
Game, will you say hi to us?
Yeah.
I will off air.
No. Will you give us a shout out?
No, this is a professional outfit. We don't do shout outs.
Oh.
All right.
For Joe.
Bye, Kevin.
See ya.
Jessi, if people want to read or hear your stuff, where can they find your information?
NHL.com after every game. That's my lovely work for the Minnesota Wild. And then Bar Down Beauties, new episodes released each and every Monday. We're going to get you guys on there coming up here soon. So whoop, whoop that. And Minnesota Hockey Journal, USA Hockey Magazine. There are two fantastic cover stories coming out that I had handed Justin Hull on the Minnesota Hockey Journal, Brock Besser for USA Hockey. So keep a lookout for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessi.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
And Pat, this is our last off-season edition of Beyond the Pod. We've always kept this an off-season podcast. I am currently contemplating whether to keep this going in the regular season. So maybe this is not the last of us.
I hope not. I love doing the in-between period stuff when we can.
Yeah.
We don't have to do it every game, but if we have the opportunity, it's
Especially the late games.
always fun to do.
Yeah. All right, Pat.
Thanks,
talk to you later.
Great job.
All right, he's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode of Beyond the Pod. Thank you so much to Kevin Falness and Jessi Pierce for joining us. Maybe we'll talk to you next week on Beyond the Pod. Thank you so much for listening all off season. Bye.